Good morning. You got to give it back. You got to give it back. Okay. Okay. How many of you went to the restaurant last night? And how many went to the club afterwards? Okay. All right. All right. Again, first I'd like to give all honor and praise to the God of creation who has blessed us all to be here together safely. I pray that your journey here was without incident, and your return to your families and extended families is also likewise without incident. I don't take lightly the opportunity to share that you would, again, come and share this time together and to come to hear me and participate in such an important gathering. And there's a lot of different things you could be doing with your time. But obviously you think enough about the topic to be here and to get up after last night and be here. So I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you. Can everybody hear me well? Our topic, of course, is new strategies in sustainable development, specifically for Africa. And I want to again commend the directors for the Rise in Africa conference, because truly I want to begin with a thought and leave with a thought. The thought that first I want you to think about is that for many of us, Africa has been projected as a continent that's primitive and has been left behind. I want you to change your perspective a little bit. You're the new leaders looking for applications for development in the future. We have witnessed, in many respects, the failures of the current development models in terms of being inclusive and crafting a world that reflects some level of, without exploitation of the people and the environment that we depend upon in which to live. So if we look at the current world like that, then we can turn to look at Africa again. Then we realize that Africa has been preserved, that Africa has been preserved to give us the opportunity to develop it right. You with me? We don't have to repeat the mistakes that have been made up until this point. We don't have to take urban areas like Detroit and realize the problems that have been made in Detroit and replicate them in Dar es Salaam. We don't have to recreate the environmental problems that are destroying our water and our air in cities and metropolises like Los Angeles with the millions of people, and then repeat that same effort in Lomé. We don't have to do that. We, you, we have the opportunity now to create new strategies for developing a world where the people are living in harmony as well as with the environment which they depend upon to survive. Because without that second element, we are then building in our own destruction. And in many respects, that is what we are witnessing around the world. So I want to start with that thought. Africa has been preserved for us to have the opportunity to develop it correctly. All right? Now, I come in representation of as the director of the African Hebrew Development Agency and also African Boreholes Initiative, which is African Hebrew Development Agency is an NGO specifically to effect just what I was speaking of in terms of becoming involved in development projects and creating development projects which are in harmony for the people and the environment and which are sustainable because eventually they require the ownership of the people who are being involved. African Boreholes Initiative specifically because water is so critical, the access to water. Many of us know already about the many stages of drought and the threats of drought which are posed by the current trends in climate change, which are affecting the continent disproportionately in many ways. But when you think about it even much more personally, that our consciousness about water must go to the fact that our bodies are 70% water. And our health is very much dependent upon the fact that we have continued access to water to the point that we're replacing in our body what we're made of. So water becomes an essential element whether we're in Africa or anywhere else, that we keep that consciousness about water, all right? And this will also go into a water resource management plan. Excuse me. So the strategies which I will ultimately describe and the projects which I ultimately describe grew out of a personal effort that was inspired in many ways in the diaspora and then affected in Africa. I'm going to be giving you several new concepts today, so go with me, all right? First of all, the African Hebrew Development Agency, NGO, grew out of the African Hebrew Israelite community, a community of Africans from the diaspora who returned to homeland, Israel, to establish new communities, all right? In 1967, this diaspora community left the United States, went into Liberia, left West Africa for 2 years, and then in 1969 began the process of immigrating into Israel for the development of these new communities, new paradigm of development. Since 1969, I won't get into all the political dynamics of Israel. We'll discuss that at another time because that's another topic, all the things that we had to go through in that process, which are still in many ways ongoing. But the intention was to, as I said, to establish these communities which reflect the application of correct development processes to cause the people and the environment to synergize again and take the applicable laws of the Creator and make them practical and applicable in the lives of men. So in 1969, this process began. So many of the processes which are now being affected through the African Hebrew Development Agency were first of all tried out on us. We were the prototype. We were the control group, the development model, to make sure that some of these things worked. And again, one of the specific reasons, of course, is as we look at the African continent and many of the things that have been tried in terms of development strategies since independence in the mid-'60s and latter '60s, and we look at the condition today, we see the disparities are in many ways worse than they were then. And in many of the conditions in terms of the livelihood of the people is worse. When I look at Ghana, for example, and I'll use Ghana as one of our examples for a lot of things today because we're very, very active there. The projected lifespan in Ghana was 70 years old at the time of independence. It's 57 today. It's 57 after all the intervention strategies, all the HIV conferences, all the malaria conferences, how did it come down almost 20 years? Something's not working. And so we have to get back now. And then the other dynamic to that is the fact that the lifespan in the villages is now longer than that in the cities. Now, in the cities, they have access to cars and insurance and all the modern attributes of the Western world. Why is it still that, in spite of the lack of access to clean water, malaria incidence being higher, Buruli worm in the water, how is it still that they're living longer in the villages? So obviously there's some things that we had at immediate access to in village life that we left going to the cities in exchange for modernity. And the cost was too high because now our lives are shorter. So I bring that specifically because the fact that that's something I mentioned yesterday. Except that we're talking ultimately about the health, the prolonged life and longevity, viability, activity, productivity of the people, we're having an empty discussion about development. If we're not securing the health of every individual under our leadership, then we're not talking about development. We're creating a paradigm where this group of people is a disposable income, labor pool for someone else's ultimate benefit. And that is not what we would see as good leadership, would we? See, as we talk about leadership too, I want to put one other thought out there for us to consider as we move forward. There, as I said, leadership conferences going on here, there, and everywhere right now around this, especially to try to engage young people in leadership. But it's not like we're looking at a continent and communities that are without leaders at present. There are leaders there, and they're very active. But the question becomes, when we add this other particular adjective to the equation, we want to develop effective leadership and effective leaders. Now, what does an effective leader look like? What does an effective leader promote? What is the self-image he projects for himself and the images or the desires he has for his people? That's an entirely different, just that word alone, effective leadership, causes us to think something else, because as we look at the results that we're looking at now are not effective. So we're looking for new dynamics here. Going back, in recognizing the fact that said that the village has been such an integral part in the sustaining of African communities, then it would do well for us to invest ourselves into the development and sustaining of the village. And I mentioned the health of the people. One of the things that we had to first realize is that, except that, now no one would, if I said, are you intelligent? Everyone would say yes. Ask how many people smoke? How many people drink alcohol? How many are engaged in activities that you know cause your health to be negatively affected? Right? When we began to look at taking responsibility for our own lives, we had to begin to check off those things that we had been involved in, that we knew that were not contributing to that in the positive direction, all right? And begin to make those cornerstones for, again, a personal and then the national policies in terms of development, because, again, the first element has to be the maintaining of the health of its people. And any leaders who want to see the forward progress of their communities, of their nations, must invest in the health of their people. So we decided to do that first, begin to check off those things and those habits which were negative in terms of causing a destruction or an erosion in our health. And then the next element became to devise that any institution established in the community had to also play a role in that process. What do I mean? You have supermarkets in Germany, right? Yes? Do you have health food stores too? Why do you need both? Why do you need both? Obviously, because one store is not healthy. You wouldn't have no need for a health food store if everything you were getting in the supermarket was already healthy. Obviously, there's a difference. Now, we're smart people, aren't we? Y'all with me? Am I speaking, is my English too fast, or did you ever think about that reality? Obviously, the food that we're getting out of the supermarkets is predominantly unhealthy. And we consume it in rates which are unhealthy. And therefore, it continues to erode our health. So then we had to create a whole new phenomenon called a health food store, when the purpose of eating in the first place was to maintain and sustain your health. It's not logical. It's not logical. So let's step back. Because at any store that we produce in our new village can only sell healthy food. What would be the results of that? Now, we also realize from our observations as we look at a world where non-communicable diseases and lifestyle diseases are proliferating at an incredible rate, where we see obesity and childhood obesity all across Europe and the Americas, the Western world. All of these areas are professing or marking the alarming rise in obesity and the diseases related to obesity in terms of high blood pressure, heart disease, etc. So as effective new leaders, and we realized that the cause of much of this was the new couch potato mentality and the lack of activity, then we would then incorporate laws and strategies, codes of conduct, which ensured the activity of our people, right? Seeking to do that, we established principles in our new village in Israel that every adult must exercise at least 3 times a week. Some form of exercises cause you to perspire. Something you can fast walk, you can play basketball, you can play tennis, you can play soccer, you can play something that causes you to perspire 3 times a week. Realizing that the first benefit of exercise is not physical, but mental. The mental refreshment. I'm not just talking about the endorphins that one feels good. How many of you have exercised and felt good afterwards before? That's not what I'm talking about. That is a positive effect. But also the fact that a regular exercise causes additional blood flow to the brain, which then creates new avenues and the development of new connectors in the brain. So there is an actual physical result, improvement in brain capacity that is developed through exercise. So you get both mental and physical benefits from this. Now, in terms of a responsible, effective leader, would that be something we'd like to include in the development of our new village, of our new national objective? Don't be afraid to say, yeah, you can agree with me. You get a chance to disagree during the questions and answers. But just go with me for a moment, all right? So, next, we're still talking about health. And we talked about stores. We talked about exercise. But now we're talking about agriculture, organic agriculture, that we wouldn't then begin to use chemicals, which we know ultimately will destroy the life of the soil that we are drawing our nutrients from as a regular practice. Let me give you another equation. Let's go back to a little, I'm from the Holy Land, so you'll pardon me if I use a little biblical history, okay? Biblical history says that man was created from the dust of the earth. And in science today says if you look in the man's body, dissect the body of a human being, you find 70% water and 30% are a combination of elements which are found in the soil, which would kind of confirm that equation, right? So then it would be important then in terms of maintaining one's health that you would continue to put back in your body what your body is made of. So that means you're going to drink plenty of water, 70%, and then you're going to have to consume these elements which are found in the soil. Well, the most practical way to consume these elements is through the plants which grow from the ground and contain these elements in them, right? So we became vegans as a national policy and have developed the veganism to the point where we can produce virtually all of the favorites that we used to eat prior to as we were meat eaters before, but we can replicate the taste, textures, and the nutritional value in non-meat sources. Now, this has as its effect also a number of elements because we also, through our science and research, have realized that the amount of water which one uses to raise cattle is 10 times as much as to, I think for one head of steer is like 10 acres of grains. So, again, we're new leaders now. Would that be effective water management to use enough water to raise one steer or cow that's going to feed I don't know how many people, rather than use that same amount of water to raise 10 acres of grain to feed that many people? Even if it was our habit, our logic would have to kick in and tell us that's not a good, I'm not trying to convince you to be vegans right now. Let's just talk about water management. Mm-hmm. Would that be intelligent water management to invest water in raising and then raise the grain, feed the grain to the cow, mm-hmm. and then eat the cow? We can do better than that. So organic agriculture, water management all become very essential cornerstone policies for the development of a people. And you take organic agriculture. Now, so you see now the provision of health has already affected a number of other different ministries or areas of our development because now water management is a part of it, and agriculture, education, and health are all connected, right? All these things are. So, finally, economic development. one of the things that has been cornerstone of Western development is the great disparities in wealth, in terms of that 1% of the population influences or controls 80-90% of the wealth. There is a significant number called the middle class that is constantly being championed in order to give the lower echelon something to shoot for. But nevertheless, this great disparity exists, and the drive for individualism. When prior to the pursuit of European models, Africa was very much a collective society. The villages were designed on collectivism, right? So we see a return toward collectivism or communalism as an essential aspect in terms of securing the future. Why? Why do I say that's important? When you spend time on the African continent, especially in the cities today, you find out and you talk to many of the leaders and those business leaders, both the politicians, and you see them on the weekend, and you say, what are you doing for the weekend? They say, I need some time to relax. And say, where are you going? They say, to the village. What was it about this? What was the great de-stress mechanism that existed in the village that you have to get back to when you want to unwind? It was that collective, social, extended family network, because we were very much social beings, very much social beings. And the fact that if you go and I would challenge that many of them, when you go do something by yourself, you can't wait to get back to your best friend or friends to share the experience with them, because it's just telling them about it causes you to relive and refeel all those good feelings that you had by yourself. But it's not like and you always say, oh, I wish so-and-so was here with me. I wish Mark was here with me to have seen this. Because we're connected. And to deny that connection very much denies part of our humanity. So rather than deny that, we want to celebrate that and continue to restore and build those connections which have been at the foundation of the sustenance of our societies. All right? Are y'all with me now? Yeah. I want to provoke some new thoughts, because I could very easily stand up here and just show you some of the projects that we're doing. But if I don't show you the thought that went into creating them, then perhaps you won't see, there won't be a connection, so that they grew out of and have grown from real African experiences of antiquity and today, and the how should we say, contemporary application in many respects of ancient wisdom. Because many of the things that we talk about today, leadership, etc., as if Africa didn't have leadership, that Africa didn't have agri-policies, it did. But they somehow got lost or replaced by others which are not serving long-term interests. So many times we just had to go back and we say, what were we doing? And then bring them to in terms of modern applications. And with the opportunity that we have now to develop Africa correctly, because it's not left behind, it's been left for us to do it right. Okay? I want to take a few minutes to walk through a couple of PowerPoints to kind of talk about the application of some of these new strategies for development. All right? How from this community in Israel, this African diaspora community that then returned home to Africa and developed new development strategies, is now, through these institutions, creating new projects and programs to be shared in and on the continent. All right? You can help me? Mm-hmm. You have the other microphone? The handheld now? Test. Health strategies.
Can everybody see this? Or do we turn the light down?
going to go through it somewhat fast because you'll get the idea. We feel it's much more important. Across the African continent, we see that the disease burden has overburdened the healthcare infrastructure, right? That there are not enough, in many instances, care for those who need it. And in many instances, those who need it are not able to get to those services, those facilities, right? Yes? Well, we took a different approach. That perhaps it's better to have a practice or a policy where you practice preventive medical techniques. That is, encouraging proper diet, exercise, lifestyle, etc., which ultimately cause you to reduce the pressure on your curative system. And then one other idea that was shared with me by the former Minister of Health from the country of Ghana after we began to discuss this, he said, realistically, the Ministry of Health is exactly what we're talking about in terms of preventing illness. He says when you become ill, you move into an entirely different ministry. That's the Ministry of Ill Health. That's an entirely different cycle of hospitals, clinics, etc. And we looked at each other and said, well, I have doctors who are my friends, but I don't want to need their services. So let's practice a policy of prevention. We then make prevention our national policy. Now that's something different, because I think across the world now we see that, and we have witnesses in countries all around the world, people talking about the significance of diet and healthy lifestyles. But in terms of making it the national policy, that's something different. That's another level of leadership, and that's good governance for a minister of health to say, my objective is to keep my people healthy, period, not just to provide services for them to get to a hospital, and if that need is there. It's much more enlightened, if I might say. In 2005, the Minister of Health of Ghana came to Israel, and he visited the modalities, the preventive modalities that we'd established there, and he asked us, he said, can you design a project for Ghana to change a population of 22 million people to a preventive lifestyle? We said yes. We sent 5 people to do a preliminary baseline study. What are the disease burden that presently exists, and how can we begin to affect these changes, and also, of course, tie into the alleviating or the achieving of the Millennium Development Goals, which I've mentioned are very honorable. Reduction of poverty and prevention of mother and child mortality and whatnot. We decided then to create a project called the Regenerative Health and Nutrition Program, whose objective was, again, regenerate, renew the strength of every individual, and in so doing, prevent diseases. Because how many more headlines do we need to see? The 24,000 children die each year from preventable disease. 70,000 people die in Germany just from poor diet-related diseases annually. How many more headlines do we need to see to realize that there need to be some adjustments in that area? So Regenerative Health and Nutrition was born. It had 3 primary components. Mother and child care, realizing that it is the health of the mother at the time of birth which will determine the direction of that child's health for the first 40 years of his life. What your mother did while she was in conception with you, and immediately the 9 to 27 months afterwards, affected your health for 40 years. 40 years. So the mother's health is important. Mother and child here, in addition to the health of the child. Second area was nutrition. Advocating moving to a plant-based diet. Now, that's a very challenging aspect, not only because of what our habits are, but because of also that across the continent in many areas, it's believed that as you progress or you gain greater status, you should eat more meat, because that is a symbol of status. Now, of course, the health problems that come with it are disregarded, but that is what the mindset was. So now we have to create a new mindset in terms of diet and nutrition. Also accompanied with that was, again, significant increase in water and fruits and vegetables. And, of course, this is something heard very much or very common in these days that we read newspaper articles, et cetera, in terms of the increase in the fruits and vegetables that individuals consume. And then how to consume them, because you don't eat them together. I know you don't hear that all the time, but that's a problem in terms of health. Third area, healthy lifestyles. Every decision you make in your day affects your health either positively or negatively. Every one. Everything you listen to, everything you expose yourself to affects it either positively or negatively. Making a sincere evaluation of what we're doing in our day-to-day lives and what is the impact it's having cumulatively on our health. Those three elements were the three fundamental elements of regenerative health and nutrition. Now, to make a national policy, that required not only intervention in terms of the medical services personnel, doctors, nurses, technicians, and all those areas, but it also, you have to create a critical mass of people who buy into it. So that meant reaching into the public and into the cities and into the villages and into the different stakeholders, individuals of influence such as the chieftaincy and queen mothers and assemblymen and women, all areas of the population, student population, to begin to expose them to this new idea and get them to buy in, as you can imagine now. So this is a mammoth undertaking, all right, when you begin to talk about a country of 22 million people. We took, and then, of course, the ultimate objective is we're talking about sustainable development. So we're not talking about bringing a team in that's coming to stay. We're bringing new ideas that become the ideas and become the possession of the people who are going to affect them. So we designed a program that over 3 years, we'd come in first with 15 individuals who would do trainings around the country. That number will reduced in half the next year because we're building capacity, because you're turning the program over to the individuals who live there and live by this new code of conduct. And then, of course, cycle yourself out of a job. We're not looking for development projects to be full-time jobs for people coming in from the outside. That's counterproductive. We talked about that some too yesterday, didn't we? Okay. Let's go through this very quickly, please. The objective is to create change agents, expose individuals to the information that causes them then to wherever they go, for their institutional and their employment or they're going home, that these things are in them in terms of implementing change in their environment. That we took 10 districts across Ghana. The team would load up and literally relocate to these particular areas. And what you see here is members of the development team, support staff, getting on the buses, going into the villages where we would have these training sessions. Regenerative health and nutrition. We had 5 basic messages. This was just 4 of them. Water is medicine. That if you don't drink water in the proper amount, you're going to cause problems. Many of the diseases people encounter today are a direct result of chronic dehydration. Many of us don't even drink water. We drink sodas, we drink juices, but they were not a replacement for water. Foods, fruits and vegetables, locally grown, organically grown fruits and vegetables are medicine. They have a medicinal quality in them to preserve health. Exercise is medicine. When you realize all the positive impacts and outputs that come from regular exercise, mental and physical, in terms of blood flow and the movement of nutrition through the body and the expelling of toxins from the body, all those are results of exercise, and exercise is medicine. And then rest. Adequate rest. The body requires adequate rest to go through its healing cycles every day. So if we include that, all these, again, are medicinal practices that don't cost you, like the significance of a visit to the hospital, pharmaceuticals, etc. Next. Pre-training activities. Again, it's very important, as I said, to engage all the stakeholders in the process. Sensitization, meeting with key stakeholders, meeting with chiefs, queen mothers, assemblymen and women, those who have influence within the community. Moving into the schools and showing significant videos and lectures about diet and exercise. Walk for Life, which is a community rally. We would come to a particular village and walk for 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers. But at the end of this 10-kilometer walk, involving all the people in the community who would come out, we would have a community-wide exercise. And you'll see exercise sessions where individuals, 1,500, 2,000 people coming and exercising together to instill a new idea in the village. School visits, as I mentioned, and also going to churches and mosques. And anywhere we found large bodies of people to engage them with this new idea and create this critical mass. You can kind of go through it rapidly here. These are some of those activities, meeting with stakeholders. And the meeting was, and you see many of the, again, the chieftaincy was very important because remember, in many African societies, a sign of wealth is your girth. You know, when you become a chief or a big person, you're supposed to be a big person. But there became the realization that you were not a big person, you were a sick person. You were on your way to heart disease, you were on your way to arteriosclerosis, you were on your way to a number of preventable diseases. But because there was this new cultural idea that you were supposed to be big, you were killing yourself. So we had to attack that idea. But one of the easiest ways, we said, do you want to live? And that began to cause people to think again. In the schools, having contests for the young people to grasp the new concepts. Winning school. Churches and mosques. See, because good health has nothing to do, well, has everything to do, in one respect, and nothing to do with one's religion. Whatever religion you practice, you want to be healthy, that you can practice it. So there was equal access across the country. As I mentioned, it was important, again, to reach into all the corners so there were 5 television documentaries done on the program. There was regular appearances and segments added to the morning talk shows and the morning television shows. Programs were done both all in the local languages and all the local languages as well. We took a strategy initially, hold on one second, that the war against disease is just as significant as the war for independence. Why do we say that? If you look up and you say that 50,000 of our citizens are dying from a particular disease every year, if you flip it and say 50,000 are dying in war, you'd want to attack that adversary. Well, if we realize then that this disease is an adversary, then we will mobilize in an effort to attack it like we would any invader. And so that's how we wanted to energize the public about this. You coming to fight against disease. Walk for Life. That was the community rallies. Interjecting new concepts, key fit clubs. And again, people want to live, and they turned out in the thousands regularly and began to discuss this and take these ideas home. Again, community-wide exercise programs and exercise days. It's not so difficult when you're not by yourself. Now, I like this picture because these individuals here, all of these are chiefs. You might have seen them in one of the previous pictures. They were all in the gold, and they had the country cloth and the kente cloth. But when they realized now that they wanted to live, they came out the next day in their sweatsuits. Okay. School kids. This is an exercise session at the end of a 10-kilometer walk. And at the end of the exercise session, water trucks would be brought in to encourage the drinking of water instead of beer after activity. And then after the water trucks, then came in the fruit trucks because, again, fruit is in abundance. So fresh pineapple, fresh banana, fresh. Yeah. At the conclusion of each district of activity was the establishment of a community health committee that also involved matrons, the nutritional staff from hospitals and schools, that they would begin to incorporate some of these new ideas and practices into the dietary plans for the schools and hospitals. Okay? Go ahead. Yeah, we can go ahead. So after the community rally, then we'd have an opening ceremony where we choose 90 of the local healthcare workers or those in areas related to health, like environmental protection, agriculture, rural development. And the training session would actually last 5 days. And they would be exposed to those 3 training modules: healthy lifestyles, nutrition, mother and child care, everybody, for those 5 days. Okay? These are some of the areas of healthy lifestyles, preventive health techniques. It's okay. People-to-people ecology. And that goes back to what I talked about before in terms of our relationships and how they play a role in our health. Weight management, introduction to exercise, personal hygiene, environmental cleanliness, touch therapy, massage therapy. One of the laws of our new communities and effective leaderships is that everybody has to have at least one full-body massage a month. Anybody mad about that? Anybody want to repeal that law? I said a minimum of one a month. I mean, so you can have as many as you want. But again, for all the benefits that come from massage or touch therapy. And these are elements that we restored into the lifestyle practices. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, we don't have to go like that. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, there would be 90 plus in each district. There would be 90 healthcare workers who would come and be exposed to the different modules. And then there would also be representatives of the clergy, representatives of the student associations, representatives from the media, and then incorporated with that as well was a study tour. The minister had enough foresight and vision that he wanted many of the leaders of the Ghanaian society to experience what he did in terms of understanding the program from its roots. So we created a study tour program where 200 of them came to Israel on a rotating basis to see how we started the programs as well, from conditions very similar to what they were experiencing, so no one would be intimidated by the idea. All right? Okay. Just trying to make it all practical. All right. Another area in terms of rural development, before I go to that. We talked about, against strategies and sustainable development in terms of organic agriculture. We have created what we call the Restoration Village concept, and there are a number of ways to get into it. This is just one of them, all right? Again, understanding the centrality and the significance of the village in African societies and not wanting to replicate some of the problems in developing urban areas, oversized urban areas. We wanted to increase the quality and viability of life in the village. That then would cause one immediate benefit, that a number of young people who do not see an option or an opportunity to develop a dignified, productive, exciting life in the villages might see new opportunities there, and then stem the tide in terms of their migration to the cities, where many of them begin living very unhealthy lifestyles and simply doing anything to survive. I think if you're familiar with African capitals, you see many of the young people are just chasing cars, at busy intersections, just trying to sail through the windows, and you see them consuming breathing in the exhaust fumes and all that goes with that very unhealthy practice, trying to make a living. And so you understand that we're not talking about people who are lazy. I mean, but they're being exposed to some very dangerous and unhealthy conditions in order to try and survive. We as leaders can think of a better scenario than that for them. This particular project is the development of an organic agricultural training center for young people ages 18 to 35 in the area of Amafapong, which is in the central region of Ghana. The pictures that you see, because it hasn't been developed yet, are from a similar project that was developed in Benin that we designed and built for an NGO out of Geneva back in 2005. So those were the pictures are. But this was also to give them a concept of what we were looking to establish. Please. We're going to go through it kind of quickly because I want to get to, I think you're getting the idea. You with me now? Yeah. It's easy when you're talking to intelligent people. Yes, please go ahead. No, just go ahead because much of it I've said already. Again, these are some of the conditions that you see in the cities. Again, overburdened infrastructures, unable to process the rates of garbage and from the numbers of people who are just overcrowded in that area. And again, the health consequences are obvious. Please. Again, cancer, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, all these are preventable diseases which now are being imported into Africa from the West. Again, we said already, but life is healthier even in the villages at present. Division, Organic Agriculture Training Center. It's also turned toward agribusiness. But even the great thing about organic agriculture and agribusiness, even if you're not selling the product at the rate you might like to sustain yourself or employ the numbers of people you want, you are, in fact, creating the highest quality product possible to feed your population. So even if you're not selling it, you're eating it. And you're doing that which is healthy in terms of maintaining yourself and your viability and your ability to ultimately be productive in whatever you choose to do and whatever else you might choose to do. So it's important to create access to the highest quality of food for your population. Some of the aspects of the program was to use locally produced construction materials. Again, and build institutions of the highest quality to restore the pride that everything of high quality doesn't have to come from the outside. Doesn't have to be imported to be of the highest standards. And that's one of the things we proved in Benin. As you look at none of these materials that went into building this center, this dedication center, education center of 30 hectares and 37 buildings and whatnot came from anywhere but the African continent. Please. Now, in the center in Benin, of course, there were libraries, classrooms, dormitories, housing for teachers, communications center, a pharmacology center where you're just taking medicinal plants and extracting that which is most effective, a holistic clinic, a birthing center, a natural foods factory to make milk, and et cetera, from soy milk and soybeans, and about 70 different food products. All these were part of the vision of Restoration Village and what was done in Benin, and the pictures that you see there. This is the Benin project here, some of the buildings, the design. Please, there you go. And again, returning and restoring the consciousness of the significance of our relationship to the land, to the youth. Again, I mentioned very early on about the importance of maintaining the health and viability of the land and the soil and how that's connected to our health. It's a whole other environment, and environmental consciousness is not something separate from our lives. It is an integral part of life and living. So that any decision you make about the condition of the environment, you must realize that same decision is being made about your health. So if you're going to pollute the land, you're going to be polluting your body because you're going to eat what comes from that land. You're going to breathe the soil, the air, you're going to drink the water. So whatever you're doing to it, it's going to do back to you. So if we restore that consciousness in the youth, then we'll naturally develop environmental sensitive policies. Some of the partners. You got the idea? Other initiatives, that's good. Other initiatives. Again, as effective leadership, one of the most recent projects over the last year, we sent some of our engineers to India to work with a number of Indian engineers and technicians to create solar cookers, because we looked at the number of African people in the rural areas who are involved day to day. Their whole day is in cutting down trees to burn the wood to make charcoal to cook, right? Now, there are two very negative consequences to that, more than two. One, the deforestation. You cut down the trees, you're also losing the groundwater that those trees were holding in that area. So now you're damaging your water, and then when you're burning those trees, you're destroying your air. And when you're constantly exposed to that, you're also destroying your lungs. So, effective leadership. What can we create that will begin to solve this problem? So we designed solar cookers that reflect. It's a cradle, which has a solar panel, not a photovoltaic panel, that reflects the sun's rays to actually cook a pot of food. Now, what we discovered in our year-plus analysis of that was the nutritional value that is retained in the food is incredible. It is much different than cooking over another heat source. So you get an elevated nutritional value as well. And the taste then is completely different than what you might be familiar with. And I must say, I was one of the doubters in this project. I must confess, when they told me that, oh, this is a plate of food that was cooked on the new solar cooker and sent it over to you to eat, I was not excited until I tasted it. And the taste was so vibrant and vivid and so much different than what I was accustomed to. I said, what was done to this? And there was no seasoning on it whatsoever. So I couldn't wait to try it hot. And we continued to evaluate it and analyze it, and the nutritional value and content is so much higher. Again, you can pass these things around. You can look at it, because we had a few things we could pass around. Pass these around. That's some brochure information on the African Hebrew Development Agency and the African Boreholes Initiative in terms of water project. Absolutely. I know. What can I say? Last minute. But now, I want you to take this idea, and you got a nutritional benefit, you got an environmental benefit, you got a health benefit, you got a monetary benefit, because now, let's say you're living in the cities. Let's say one day a week you're not buying gas to cook or electricity. So you got an economic savings, you got an environmental savings, you got a health savings. Well, now you take your neighborhood and you do it once a week. Have a solar banquet. Do it 3 times a week. How's that going to alter the carbon dioxide footprint? How's that going to influence the amount of money you're saving, the amount of money that's now available in the community to do other things? Just by some very minor changes that don't cost you a lot of money. Y'all with me? Effective leadership. We need just new development models. The ones that have been given to us have failed us. Why can we say that? Because they're failing the people who have been using them for years. We wouldn't have a need for a Copenhagen if these policies were working, would we? So that's okay. So I think you got the idea. I want to wind down now. We new leaders, effective leaders, are challenged with creating new avenues, new projects, programs for sustainable development that will become the possession of the people who they're sent to serve, that they will possess them. We can do that by putting ourselves in those situations, right? And begin to think differently. Think differently in terms of the world we desire to build and demand of ourselves to build it. But we don't have to be afraid of anything, because you are talented enough. Know that some things take longer than others to accomplish, but nothing is beyond your reach. And that is the thought I want to leave you with. I think that is most significant, that we have been given this opportunity to redevelop Africa to be this new model of development for the rest of the world. No, it's not behind. It's not primitive. It's preserved for me and you to have this opportunity. So I think we have still time for questions and answers. I'd like to open the floor for questions and answers, and I pray that the message